This is The Right Approach. I'm JW Judge, and with me, as always, is my co-host Barbara Hinske. This is a podcast for writers to learn more about the craft and business of writing as we explore a new topic every week. Our guest this week is Christopher Hoffman. He is a native of Nebraska. He's also lived on the East Coast and now resides in St. Paul, Minnesota. He has tended bar and repaired bicycles for years before and after graduating or attending graduate school in biblical studies. While in their PhD programs, he and his partner started an online business that focused on editing, permissions work, and literary agent research, a business that continues today as copyright consultants, of which he is the co-director. Christopher, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's very nice to be here.
Yeah, so you're like, I think probably half of our guests in the last several months have come because they wrote something on Jane Friedman's website, and that's where I read them and found them and wanted to talk to them about that, and that's how I came across you.
Yeah, what a fantastic website. What a fantastic authority and voice for people trying to get published and people who've already been published. Jane's just um, a fantastic person to look to for anything you want to know, and we're really pleased to uh, be able to be featured as an occasional guest writer.
Yeah, and I know that we're here to talk about finding the right literary agent for authors that are looking, and I have been through that in the last, I guess I started in July and went through that journey for a while. Um, but I'm going to derail the conversation before we even get into it to talk about copywriting for a minute. Because when I started my law blog in 2016, one of the things I went and read a lot about, because I was trained as a historian and then went to law school. And so that's very different kinds of writing than
Mhm.
than the writing that people want to read. And so I did a lot of reading about copywriting and listening to podcasts about copywriting, and to this day, it has changed my legal writing. It's changed my creative writing. And I think that it's a really worthwhile thing for people to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that having an awareness of the sorts of writing that you're interested in, and uh, in conjunction with the sorts of writings other people are interested in reading, is
Mm-hmm.
really, really important. And that's one of the things I think that often can derail somebody before they even get started, is not understanding what it is people want to read, especially right now, because that changes over time. What people were reading 40 years ago is not what people are reading today. There are exceptions, obviously, but
Sure.
having an idea what people like to read and what kind of things they like to read is super important.
And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, and something that I still think about a lot, is don't force people to burn too many mental calories to figure out what you're saying.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because I know when I go back and look at things that I wrote in my 20s, so much of it is overwritten and is gross and self important. And it took a while to get over that. And, you know, within the last 8 years, so much of my focus has been on, okay, what is the simplest version of saying what I want to say and still using the language that I want to use and communicates, this particular character, or, if it's nonfiction, then is appropriate for the format or that sort of thing. But, you know, saying it in the simplest terms.
Well, I'm sure that Barbara can speak to this much better than I can, but again, I think knowing your audience and knowing what it is you're writing is just incredibly important to the type of writing you're doing. If you're writing a beach, romance novel for somebody to read in the sun while the kids are running around screaming, right? You're not going to write like Jorge Luis Borges, right? Like somebody might think he's very overwritten for certain kinds of things, or one of his great fans, one of my favorite authors, Umberto Eco, right? Like, it's incredibly complicated writing, but that is not appropriate for all places. You really need to know your genre. You really need to know your category and what fits in there.
That is so true. And if you need to keep a little piece of paper in the front of your book to write down the characters, because you won't, John le Carré is somebody who writes brilliantly, but rarely do I have the mental energy to do that. Because especially if I only have limited amounts of time to read a novel, so I won't get to do it every day. So then I have to have that crib sheet at the front. This is back like in school days. No. So not in like your analogy of the person on the beach with the kids running around probably doesn't want a 500 or 600 page book because they'll be off vacation by the time, and then they'll never get back to it. And there's only so much chaos your brain can hold. And if it's all on the page, you just got to decide, is that my market? And if it's not your target market, don't do it. If you want to be commercially successful. And I think most people who are listening to this podcast want commercial success versus simply the badge of honor of having written, which is true, of having written and published a book. And people can be proud of that, whether they ever sell 100 books or not. But I think that's not what we're talking about here.
Well, and I think that knowing what you want is a good segue into the conversation that Christopher's actually here for before I got distracted. And I think that goes along with finding your ideal literary agent. And so I know that there's a lot of approaches for this. I'd say that there's probably not one that is like objectively best or worst. And so a lot of this will be subjective, but Christopher, talk to us, whatever is a natural jumping off point for this conversation about finding your ideal literary agent. And, that's certainly only the beginning of the process. But how to get started with that.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I don't mean to be a sort of buzzkill, but I kind of have a little problem with, for people who are just beginning, the idea of an ideal literary agent. The literary agent that's right for you is the one who gets you to the finish line, the one who takes you and gets you to the finish line at the beginning, right? And doesn't, obviously is ethical and is all that kind of stuff. But not a lot of my clients, but I have no small number of clients who kind of come in with the idea that, they've written the next great American novel and they're not making any sacrifices or changes. And, they have a bunch of demands, and, someday maybe they'll get to make those demands if they sell that novel and they get to be super fancy and important. And, maybe someday, maybe your first literary agent will be your ideal literary agent. And maybe, like often happens, after a while of selling books and being successful, you find a different literary agent that is better for you than the one you originally had. Or maybe you stick with that one your whole career. But this sort of the person who's perfect for me is at least for people who want to be commercially successful, who want to get in the door, is the one who believes in you, right? And who's willing to take you. And so I really sort of approach that initial search. I tell a lot of my clients, this is like applying for a job or applying for grad school. Meaning all the stuff that shouldn't matter does matter, like your query letter and your synopsis being absolutely perfect, not because they somehow represent your writing, but because literary agents, just like admissions offices or HR departments, are getting a bajillion submissions, and they're just looking for reasons to throw you out, right? And there's a whole bunch of reasons. I had a meeting with a potential client earlier today who had a this is a debut work, and it's 300,000 words, and I just said, look, for a debut work, most agents aren't even going to look at your manuscript. They're not going to look at your sample pages. They're going to see 300,000 words, and that's an expensive book to print.
Yeah.
They're just going to toss you. Now, that doesn't mean that it's impossible to print to debut with a 300,000 word book. It happens, but one of the, not to totally go off the rails here, but along with that is, thinking about this as a job, applying for a job, applying for grad school, is not assuming that you're going to be the exception to the rule. There are exceptions. You're probably not it. Maybe you are, but you're probably not it. So what you need to do at this point is, color within the lines, make sure everything looks good, just so they'll ask for your manuscript. Or if they request pages at the beginning as part of the process, that they actually look at your pages. And then it's between your writing, the agent, and the market, right? Then you're partway there. But yeah, to go back to the beginning, I resist the idea of the ideal agent. The right agent for you is the one you find who's likely to look at your stuff, and then who looks at it and believes in you and tries to help you out.
So let's start with where to find agents who are in the genre or genres that you write and are looking for the kind of work that you're writing. What are your recommendations there?
So like I recently said in the, that post on Jane Friedman's site, I think by far the best way is Publishers Marketplace. It does require a financial outlay. You do have to pay for it, but what you save in time is 100% worth it, as well as all the tools that are available to you there. Publishers Marketplace allows you to search for deals, meaning sales that agents have made with publishers. You can search by editor, you can search by publisher, publisher, imprint, you can search by agent, you can search by keyword, title, author, so one of by far the best ways you can go about this is figure out a number of parameters that you want to consider for your book. The category or genre it's in, comp titles, other authors that you think might be similar, themes, ideas, right? And then using their deal searching function, just start going through and going, okay, I go to category of romance. I look up ghosts because I have a ghost romance, whatever it is. And you're going to find a bunch of deals that were made. And from there, you can start going, okay, this agent, let me look at what they do. Let me look at other deals they've made. Let me look at editors they've worked with. And you can kind of start narrowing this down into, okay, here's an agent who has made X number of deals that really speak to me as somehow being similar to my work. And then you look, you see if they're open, a whole nother, bag of donuts. They're open to queries. and maybe, you've got somebody for your list.
And I can add some personal anecdotes here to this, because I finished writing my 5th novel, Watch Party, in June. And when I finished, I started doing, editing, that sort of thing, which I did for several weeks. And I also started preparing to query it. So my first 4 novels and then 3 nonfiction books I had independently published myself, and I've published other authors through my publishing imprint. So, going into it, I knew I can write a book and create, or I can write a manuscript and create a book myself. I've done it for myself. I've done it for others. So I can get that into the marketplace. So I had very specific parameters of what I was looking for, knowing that my self-imposed parameters may mean that I don't find the person that I want, and then I go back to what I've been doing, all along. So my situation was a little different, and like I said, self-imposed. So I subscribed to Publishers Marketplace. Right now it's $25 a month, I think. You can get your emails every day to see what the deals are that are being made. I did a ton of research, set up my spreadsheet of the 40 something, maybe 50 something agents who met my parameters of, they were doing deals regularly in the last couple of years, which, when you start looking into literary agents, that's not always the case. And who were doing the kinds of monetary deals that, again, maybe this is a dumb business decision, only the future will tell, but that were doing what I would be willing to accept. And that may sound super, I don't know, whatever. It may sound arrogant. And I didn't get an agent. So that, that is what it is. I had a couple ask for manuscripts. They read them. And then ultimately I committed 6 months to that process. None of the folks that I had sent it to, and there's still some that I'll never hear from, it's just out in the ether. And so I decided to move forward with publishing it myself, because I can do that. And I had devoted as much time and energy into that process as I was willing to, because it was taking away from writing the next book. And so, I'm not saying that's the best way. It's probably not. But it's the way that I approached it. And so now, I'm writing the 6th novel, and I'm about a third of the way through it. And I'm already thinking about, okay, what do I want to do with this one when it's finished? And do I want to go through that process again? And I haven't reached any conclusions, but all of those things are up in the air. And for me, it's going to be a book by book decision, I think, rather than categorically, I'm want to be a traditionally published author, or I want to be an independent author. I think it'll be how each project feels.
If I can jump in here, I think you're both making good points. I think so I'm independently published in print and ebook, and trad published in audio. I have an agent who has submitted my print stuff, and we've worked through some things and just said, you're making more money indie published on those. But she's sold everything I've sent her. So that's been a wonderful relationship. But I think when people write a book, especially debut novels, and then they think, okay, I am going to be the exception, as Christopher has said, I'm going to find the agent who's going to make me James Patterson on this book. And then life is going to be set. And I won't have to trouble my pretty head about editing and formatting and covers and, God forbid, social media and all that, and my email list and all that kind of stuff, who think of this as the agent is going to spare them from all this hard work that almost everyone has to do. And so I think if you look at it as it is a business decision, yes, a traditional publisher can provide a lot of those things for you that you don't have to do yourself. So you are getting value for that, and an agent can help you get that. keep looking at it as a business decision as you hone your craft, just like you did, JD. Okay, I can self-publish this. And I'm telling you, I still hope that I'll get a trad deal that will make me rich beyond all comprehension. I mean, we all hope that. But in the meantime, I know how to do all this stuff, but I'm always got my little feelers up. If something comes along, that's fine. But I think it is good to learn all of these tasks so you can make a business decision on whatever path you're taking, and not just go forward thinking, oh, yeah, I don't know how to do this. I'm just going to close my eyes and hope. That's not a good strategy.
I think just to respond a little bit to JW, I don't think what you did is arrogant at all. That's having open eyes about your situation, which is incredibly important. And with self-publishing being such a viable option for both getting your work out there, but for selling and making money off of it, if you have the wherewithal to do that, if you have the time, the ability to make that happen, why wouldn't you have that as this alternative? I think the sort of very specific advice that I gave is really for people who, most of my clients have another job, their main job. This is something they do in their spare time, or did in their spare time. Often they're retired and they finally are doing something they wanted to do, but for a variety of reasons, whether that's time, money, technological adeptness, right? Self-publishing is not something that, it may not be impossible for them, but the things that go along with making self-publishing a successful endeavor is maybe beyond them, or something they're not interested in. And so the traditional route is really what they're going for. And that's where you sort of have to subordinate some of your other, desires, at least immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that offers of representation are sparse and hard to come by, I think authors who get them will probably, may be inclined to cling to them and accept them no matter what. My expectation is that may not be your advice, to accept it no matter what, and that there may be other things to consider. What are some of the things authors should consider even after they get a letter of representation about whether that agent would be a good fit or not?
That's a very good question, and this is one that I think Barbara would probably be much better situated to answer in an educated way. But the main thing I would say is that you have to balance your beliefs in your own work, in your own self, with the practicalities that are in front of you, and that comes down to, for just like you just said, you had other options. If you're not offered a certain level, you're just going to self-publish because you know what you can do there. For somebody else who, let's say, self-publishing isn't an option, and they get one offer of representation and they don't care for it for whatever reason, and my assumption is going to be that what the agent is, offering is maybe less than, what maybe they're hoping for. I'll send this to 2 publishing houses, but I'm not going to go much farther than that, right? All agents are going to get the same 15% or whatever it is. So that part isn't going to change. Maybe you say, okay, I'll take a shot as long as I can get out of this deal. You rep me to 2 publishing houses, and when that doesn't work out, we're done. And I can take it somewhat where else, I can do something else. But if you only get one offer, it really comes down to what do you want? Do you want this shot, or not, or do I move on to something else and I try my next work, for, as I'm sure all the listeners are aware, and y'all are aware, many very successful authors did not get successful with their first book. They wrote several books before they ever got an agent, before they ever got a publication. This one doesn't work, we'll try something else. So, I think it comes down to that. But again, from my side of things, which is trying to get the literary agent, an offer of representation, even from, somebody that maybe isn't a superstar agent, is a fantastic validation. That's that somebody somewhere thinks they can sell your book, that there's a market for your book, that there's some money to be made off of your book, and not many people get that validation. So even if it's not the greatest, I think that at the very least, an author should feel validated by that. And if they feel like they have to say no, well, that they should turn that into motivation for the next book.
That's a very good point. I think I was self-published for 3 or 4 books before I got an agent, and she found me. She had been in-house with Audible, went outside, started an agency, and was just looking to sell audio rights. And that's all I was doing. Well, on my print and ebook, all I wanted to sell was audio rights. So I think I might have been her first client. That was like 11 years ago. And she's branched out since then. We have branched out together. So things can come at you. And she contacted me, which is always kind of a little scary, because you think, oh, automatically this is somebody who's trying to scam me. Well, it wasn't, but it takes some due diligence. I had another agent wanting to rep one of my books that didn't sell, but her contract was she would only approach Amazon imprints. And I thought, no, because I wasn't that thrilled with her anyway. And I thought, well, that's like cherry picking. If she runs it through Amazon and Amazon turns it down, probably no other agent would want to take it on, because they're just left with whoever's. So I think you always have to look at the deal from a business perspective. And I should, like JW, I'm a lawyer. I was a business lawyer. So for me, all this other stuff, the contracts and the format, all this kind of stuff is just in my happy little wheelhouse. So I was good with all of that, which made it easier for me. If that was Siberia to me, then I think I would have been more intent on being trad published, so I didn't have to mess with all that evil stuff. And sometimes I think I'm crazy and I wish I hadn't decided to mess with it, but not often. But you raise a good point. Don't throw away your shot. If you're going to turn it down, make sure you have really good, valid business reasons to turn it down.
And Christopher, one of the things I learned in this process is not all rejections are created equal. And I got a lot of different flavors and varieties of rejections. And one of them kind of opened my eyes, because they said, they emailed me back and said, hey, I, think this is an interesting project, but it involves a plane crash and I don't do plane crashes. And so I'm out. And, there's nothing you can do about that. No matter the quality or anything else, like, they just weren't going to get past that personal side of it. And so, there's going to be business reasons, there's going to be personal reasons, there's going to be, and most of the time you're not going to know what the reasoning is. But how do you advise clients about dealing with the copious amounts of rejection that they're likely to experience as part of the process?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a tough one. And I kind of hate to be the just rah, yay, everything's great person. But first of all, if you get a rejection that's personalized from an agent, take that as a win. Most agents you never hear from, period.
Yeah.
So if one of them bothered to write back, at least there's a interpersonal connection happening, and it's not just a wall of silence. Second of all, if you have a rejection, especially one that speaks directly to your work. Like, you know, I like this, but I think this needs to be developed more. You're working too much on that. I think your category is wrong, right? You know, any of those things, the agent is telling you not that this isn't sellable, not that you're a bad writer, but that you need to tweak some things. You know, that maybe this isn't right, especially from their perspective, for, you know, where you're positioning it right now. And or again, you need to go back to the drawing board a little bit with your plot or your writing or whatever it is. You really should take those kinds of rejections not as rejections, but as affirmations. Those are an agent taking time to say, I have some belief in this book and that it can be done better. And by better, we mean more publishable, right? You know, so think about that. I would take all of those things as positives, generally speaking.
And one of the things, you know, that really I've had to learn about myself and how to deal with myself is that I have a fear of rejection. Much less so now than in years past. But in things like this, one of the things that I feel like it is imperative for people to understand is that the rejection of the project that you've submitted is not a rejection of you, the individual, and has no bearing on your worth as a person, and, you know, isn't speaking to those things. It's just this thing that you created isn't a fit for them for any number of reasons. But it doesn't speak to your value and your worth. And it can be really difficult to separate that when we've spent months, for some people, years creating this thing that you want to so closely identify with yourself, to come out of it and say, and create, you know, this wall of understanding of saying, okay, they didn't want that, but that isn't me. That's just the thing that I made. And that has to be okay. You got to go in knowing like this is going to happen and it's still going to be okay on the other side of it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And also, as both of you keep coming back to in different ways, to remember that these are business decisions. It's not just about you know, the writing. It's about, is this right for the marketplace? Is this, I had a client earlier today who got a lot of positive feedback from agents, but one agent said flat out that the particular perspective that he was taking is not really being done in YA and young adult these days. There's not a lot of it in the market, and that maybe he should think about repositioning this as an adult book. And this had to do with the politics of the young adult market, as you know, I'm sure you're aware, of very fraught. And this was strictly business. This wasn't a good novel for young adults. It wasn't that the agent even said that you know, on a line by line basis, that you're nothing wrong with your craft, with the writing. It's great, you know. These are business decisions, and you have to be able to separate, as difficult as it can be, that you might have created something beautiful that might just not be marketable right now. You know, you might, if you're a chef and you want to do a fine dining hot dog establishment, you might be able to take a hot dog and do the most amazing things, the things that the other chefs all around the world are going to be super excited, but nobody's going to come there, right? That's just not, it's not marketable right now. I have a lot of clients who, especially, this tends to be the sort of people who are retired now, people who are finally getting around to writing, and they're writing the books that they read when they were in their 20s and 30s. They're writing books from the 1970s. And I try to get across that, this is you got a tough road ahead of you, because this is not what's being read right now. And it's not that you're not writing well. It's not that it's not an interesting story. It's that you're doing something that's a little bit past.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. And so before we go, I appreciate you coming on, because this is a topic that we haven't, I forget what episode number this will be for us, somewhere around 60. And we haven't touched on, this issue yet. So I appreciate you coming on and talking with us about it. And the business side of writing is always something that we're interested in talking more about. So make sure to tell folks where they can find you and the work that you're doing.
So you can find us on copyrightconsultants.com. That's WRITE. We combine the writing and editing aspect with copyright, because we also do permissions issues. If you need help generating a literary agent list, we can help you with that. If you need editing, we do editing. And finally, if you need help with, this generally is more with nonfiction, but also fiction writers. If you're using other people's material that you might have some copyright issues, you might need permissions help, we can help you out with that.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you very much. It was very nice talking with y'all.
Yeah.